Hi, hello Group C. Sorry I'm not there to do this with you all, but here's my analysis of the four church documents that I looked at. So the first document was the religious dimension of education in a Catholic school, and it talked about what makes the Catholic school distinctive, and it talks about how that distinctiveness is brought on by its religious dimension, and that the religious dimension is found in a number of places within the Catholic school, and that includes the educational climate, the personal development of each student, the relationship established between the gospel and culture, and the illumination of all knowledge with the light of faith. So it was broken up into parts. So the first part was reviewing youth in a changing world and the religious dimension in the lives of today's youth. And it talks about how a lot of Catholic schools today are located in urban settings where areas are undergoing a lot of change. And it talks about how the students that attend these schools take in information from a whole lot of different sources. They take it from the media, they take it from their families, they take it from the school, they take it from everyone around them. And it also talks about how the world is ever changing, and how change occurs in different ways and at different rates. So the second part talks about the Christian school climate and the religious dimension of the school climate. And it really talked about how Catholic schools should have the inspiration of Jesus as well as the gospel spirit always evidenced within the Catholic school atmosphere. And it talks about how the Catholic school is a new environment lit by the light of faith. And so that just means that since it's a Catholic school, it has the opportunity to show God's love everywhere and to let that faith illuminate the rest of the school environment. So the third part talks about the religious dimension of school life. And it talks about how the educational process is not just humans working, but it's also a genuine Christian journey in the journey towards perfection. So the more we know, the closer we get to knowing God. So the religious dimension enhances intellectual efforts in a variety of ways. It says that interest in academic work is stimulated by the presence of new perspectives. Christian formation is strengthened and supernatural grace is given. So this is just talking about how Christ's presence within the school environment affects the school life. So the fourth part is the nature of religious instruction in the classroom and the religious dimension of formation. So it talks a lot about how the mission of the church is to evangelize, in that there is no difference between the mission of a Catholic school and a Catholic church, because both of their missions is to evangelize and create the kingdom of God. So it talks about how Catholic schools are both civic institutions as well as Christian communities, and how there is actually a very strong distinction between religious instruction and catechesis, because one strengthens students' knowledge of faith and how it fits into every aspect of their life, whereas catechesis is looking to form members of the church in particular. So the fifth part, it talks about the Christian formation process as a whole. So it talks about the dynamic nature of integral human formation. Talks about the educational goals of a Catholic school, how it shares responsibility with the church. Like I said, it has the same mission, and the fidelity to the gospel is proclaimed by the church, and that goes back to how I mentioned Catholic schools are encouraged to have the inspiration of the gospel message and Jesus integrated within all of their school atmosphere aspects. It talks about how Catholic schools provide students with strong determination and encouragement and help them develop values and good morals, as well as a motivation to be the change in the world that we need. So this is a quote that I really enjoyed from this source. Educators will know the best way to respond to their expectations, knowing that in a world of cultural pluralism, dialogue always gives grounds for hope. So as Catholic educators, what we can take away from this particular document is to keep in mind that change is always happening around us. No matter where we are, change is occurring. It happens at different rates and in different ways, but it's happening. And that we should also focus on unifying the community through awareness of everyone's cultures, of each other's cultures, letting that be something that strengthens us as a Catholic school rather than let it divide us. The second document we take a look at is the Catholic school on the threshold of the third millennium. So it talks about how education is constantly facing new challenges, especially at the turn of the 21st century. and it talks about that these challenges are the result of new cultural contexts, new socio-political contexts. So the scope of educational functions have since broadened since all these new challenges have formed. So teaching has become much more complex and more specialized. So it talks about the joys and difficulties of Catholic schools. So it talks about that Catholic schools make large contributions to the evangelizing mission of the church throughout the world that I mentioned was brought up in the first document, and how it continues to share responsibility for the social and cultural development of the different communities and people to which they belong. And then a difficulty that Catholic schools face is situations in the political, social, and cultural sphere that make it harder for students to have access to Catholic schools. So it talks about how the Catholic school is at the heart of the church, and this all goes back to how they share the same mission. So they increase awareness of the ecclesial identity of the Catholic school. That's the role of the church, and then the place of ecclesial experience molded in the Christian community is what the school actually is. So these Catholic schools hold a generous dedication to education and also mold together culture and faith in everything it does. So care for learning means loving. Catholic schools are a school with all, especially those who are weak and those who are poor. That's what Catholic schools are built for. They're to spread a spirit of love to everyone who needs it. So the quote I took from this one was, "Since the Catholic school can be of such service in developing the mission of the people of God and in promoting dialogue between the church and the community at large to the advantage of both, it is still of vital importance even in our times." So as Catholic educators, what we can take from this document is remembering the importance of fostering an environment of dialogue that is welcoming and free. So we want to encourage all of our students to be open to being curious about faith and also just talking amongst ourselves and sharing culture. And also remembering to be open about learning new cultures and new religions while remaining firm in our own personal Catholic faith, because we don't want to forget that mission of the Catholic school, but we do want to welcome our students to bring in their cultures and their faith as well. So the third document we looked at was educating to intercultural dialogue in Catholic schools, living in harmony for a civilization of love. So this one explained how Catholic schools today are faced with challenges of globalization and religious pluralism and cultural pluralism. It talks about how because of that, it's essential for Catholic schools to develop a greater awareness of what it means to be an intercultural school and what that aspect of the school environment means. So it requires an openness to universality of knowledge while staying true to their Catholic nature. And it tells us as teachers to avoid fundamentalism as well as relativism. So this article in particular encouraged schools to educate themselves in dialogues, educate themselves in faith and intercultural awareness, to express themselves with authenticity and bear witness to their present while still encountering others. So to go further, this article talked about how education contains a central challenge for the future. It allows various culture expressions to coexist while promoting dialogue to foster that peaceful society. So these aims that they have are, I'm so sorry, Lenovo's. These aims are achieved in different stages. So first, you discover the multicultural nature of one's own situation, and then you overcome prejudices by living and working in harmony, and then you educate yourself by means of the other, so a global vision and a sense of citizenship. So Catholic schools should foster encounters between different people of different cultures and backgrounds to help them create mutual understanding of different cultures and intercultural dialogue. However, it should not ever mean a loss of one's own identity, because while you should stay firm in yourself, you can still be open to learning about others, but where you come from and what you believe is what's important to you. So it calls schools to develop intercultural dialogue in their pedagogical vision, and talks about how education requires teachers and students to have an openness to other cultures and to accept other people no matter who they are or where they come from. So young people should gain valuable knowledge of others, of other cultures, but also of themselves through their experience of school, and should get a greater knowledge of what the values that belong to the other cultures in their own culture are. So this one was broken. I'm sorry, I have a spelling mistake over here should be culture and